Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. Today, I'll be doing the third installment to my 4 video series on the best of the Dracula movies. We're talking about movies that are actually based on the Bram Stoker novel, not any kind of spin offs or other takes like Dracula meets Frankenstein and House of Dracula and all that. Even though some of those were really good, we're going to stick to movies that are stories based on the source material. Now, the movie I want to talk to you about today is probably when people talk about what's their favorite version of Dracula, it tends to come up the least often. It's kind of a forgotten version. It was released in 1979. It stars Frank Langella as Count Dracula. It also stars Sir Laurence Olivier as Dr. Abraham von Helsing. Donald Pleasance is in this film. He plays Dr. Seward, and Kate Milligan plays his daughter, Lucy Seward. As you can see, like in other versions, they played with the characters a little bit, rearranged who they, their names and their affiliations with one another. But getting into the story, Mina is out walking along the shore one night. Mina von Helsing, as a matter of fact, I want to bring that up. The character Mina in this film is actually the daughter of Abraham von Helsing. Well, she's out walking along the beach. It's just after nightfall. There's a storm rolling in, and a ship crashes into the rocks. And it's the ship, the Demeter, from Romania, which is mentioned in all Dracula stories. It's how he arrives in England. And the ship crashes into the rocks and sinks, and there's one survivor that manages to swim ashore. And Mina helps him to his feet and gets him up on the shore, and he introduces himself to her as Count Dracula. So we're off and running already. The next night, Mina invites Dracula to come to her home, or come to her home the next night. She's actually living with the Sewards in Dr. Seward's hilltop mansion there close to the coast, which also doubles as a insane asylum. The lower basement part of the house is where he keeps the patients locked away. And Dracula comes to dinner, and this is where he meets Dr. Seward. He meets Lucy Seward, Mina, whom he's already met, and he meets Lucy's fiance, Jonathan Harker, of course. Now, both Mina and Lucy are immediately drawn in by Dracula's charm. He's very suave, he's very polite, very gentlemanly. They're both taken with him quite a bit, and we can see a spark of jealousy a few times in Jonathan's eyes as he can see how much Lucy is being taken with Dracula. Later that night, Lucy and Jonathan go for a nighttime walk. Dr. Seward is in the basement, working with his patients, with the staff down there, and making the rounds with the patients. And Mina decides to go to bed a little bit early. Well, this is when Dracula comes to Mina, and he bites Mina, drinks her blood. Mina is found the next morning by Lucy. She's pale white. She can barely breathe. And before Dr. Seward can get there and even try to do anything for her, she dies in Lucy's arms. So Dr. Seward sends word to his good friend Abraham von Helsing of his daughter's passing. In the meantime, Dracula has sent word that he would like for Lucy to come to his house and visit him. And he sent word through Renfield, who at this point has not gone mad yet. Renfield catches her when she's alone, tells her that the Count would like to see her. She's a little bit reluctant because, she's engaged to Jonathan, But she decides to take him up on his offer. He asks that she come over around nightfall, late in the evening, and have dinner with him. And she goes to the Count Dracula's house at Carfax Abbey, and that's when he really puts his spell on her. And from this point forward, Lucy is under Dracula's spell. Dr. Von Helsing arrives. Dr. Seward, explains to him that when he examined Mina's body, the only thing he found that was even remotely unusual is she seemed to have a wound on her neck. It looked like a couple of small holes, possibly like a bite. And Von Helsing is immediately suspicious. He doesn't reveal his suspicions just yet, but he asks Dr. Seward to join him to go down to the cemetery. He wants to exhume Mina's coffin and examine her body for himself. Of course, by the time they get down there, it's after dark. This is all happening at the same time that Lucy, as it is over at Carfax Abbey with Count Dracula. Jonathan is away during this time on a business trip to London. He won't be back for a while. So this all conveniently falls into place for Dracula. But anyway, they dig up Mina's coffin, and they open it, and that's when they discover that the bottom of the coffin has been broken through, and there's actually a tunnel dug into the ground under the coffin. Now, very near to the cemetery is an old mine shaft. They don't really ever explain what kind of mine it was, whether it was coal or what, but I'm assuming, even though I've never heard of a whole lot of coal mining in England. But anyway, the tunnel leads into the mine shaft. Dr. Von Helsing crawls through the tunnel because now he's sure, he's almost positive what's happened. Dr. Seward is thinking that it must have been grave robbers, since Mina had been buried with some of the family's effects that were worth money. But Von Helsing is pretty sure what's going on. He tells Seward to wait while he crawls in through the tunnel. He ends up in the mine shaft where he encounters Mina. And now the makeup job here is brilliant. Mina's vampire is really frightening. She's very frightening looking. The acting job here is tremendous. She comes across very, very frighteningly. She tries to bite her father on the neck. He can't bring himself to bring the cross up because this is his baby girl. Fortunately for him, Dr. Seward followed him anyway. He manages to wrestle her away as she's trying to bite her father on the neck, and he burns her forehead with the cross, a crucifix. And as she turns from him and lunges away, Dr. Von Helsing is standing there with the wooden stake, and she literally impales herself on the stake, not knowing that he was there, and she turns right into it. And then we get this very emotional scene with Von Helsing just bawling his eyes out, holding his now dead daughter. Though her soul has been freed from this eternal torment, it's a very heart-wrenching scene. The next day, Jonathan gets back. They notice that Lucy's acting strangely. Apparently, at some point during the visit to Carfax Abbey, Dracula has bitten her, and she's now infected with his blood, and he's drawing her to him. And this is when Von Helsing explains that he believes that Dracula is the vampire. Him and Jonathan Harker and Dr. Seward all go to Carfax Abbey. They get there before the sun goes down. It's still daylight. But Dracula manages to stay in the shadows inside the house and manages to fight them off and avoid them, and he escapes just as the sun's setting. He manages to escape the house, and he quickly goes to Dr. Seward's home before Dr. Seward, Von Helsing, and Harker can get back there, and he grabs up Lucy, and takes her with him, and now the chase is on. Dracula and Lucy are in a wagon being horse-drawn heading for the harbor. He's already got a ship there waiting to take him back to Transylvania. Uh, they get there. They get aboard. They get his coffin aboard the ship. The ship sets sail. Von Helsing and Seward and Harker get to the harbor. They are managed to get a small boat, small steam motorboat, like they had back in the old days, the little harbor runners that had a small steam engine on the back of them. They catch up with the ship, they get aboard, they go down into the hold where they rip open Dracula's coffin. Again, there's a fight that ensues between Harker, Dracula, and Von Helsing. Dr. Seward has stayed back at the harbor. Uh, Dr. Von Helsing had brought a large wooden stake that he intends to destroy Dracula with. Dracula wrestles it away from him and actually impales Dr. Von Helsing with it. Once he's done that, he turns his attentions to Harker. He's got him cornered, and with the last bit of his strength before dying, Von Helsing grabs a big metal hook that's hanging on a rope attached to the ship's rigging and throws it across the room and manages to hit Dracula right in the middle of his back. The hook digs into him. He can't, he's trying in vain to reach around behind himself to pull the hook out. Harker looks out one of the portals on the side of the ship and notices the sun rising. So he grabs the lever to a winch that the rope is connected to, throws it. The rope hurls Dracula upwards. The deck doors fling open. Dracula's pulled all the way to the top of the mast and is staring directly into the morning sun, where we see him begin to vaporize and light a flame. Because of this, the spell on Lucy is instantly broken. She rushes to Jonathan, and as he holds her in his arms, he looks up again, and Dracula has already been reduced to nothing, and all that remains on the hook is his cape, which is then caught in the wind, and we see it fluttering away into the distance, and thus ends the 1979 version of Dracula. First of all, my opinion of this movie, let me just say, wow. This is a wonderful, wonderful movie, and for it to be forgotten by most people when they discussed their favorite version of Dracula just blows me away. It's hard for me to grasp why this movie is so forgotten, because it is such a wonderful film. Frank Langella is brilliant as Count Dracula. He brings a level of sophistication and class to the character while never losing the menacing evil presence that is Dracula. He gives a whole new element to the character that we have not seen before this. Laurence Olivier, of course, good Lord, what could be said here? A brilliant actor. He is wonderful in the role of Abraham Van Helsing. Donald Pleasance is, as usual, does a tremendous job. He is good in everything. He is, he's wonderful as Dr. Seward. Kate Milligan, very beautiful, very talented actress, brings a strong performance in the role of Lucy Seward. It's just a wonderful movie. The score for this film by John Williams is just very haunting and foreboding. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful compliment to the tremendous cinematography by let me see here, Mr. Gilbert Taylor was the cinematographer on this film. Brilliant job. Did a great job with setting up the shots, the set designs, and even the direction of John Badham. Just everything about this movie really works. If you've never seen the 1979 version of Dracula, and there's probably a decent chance you haven't, because like I said, it's one of the least remembered versions, do yourself a favor. If you're a fan of Dracula movies, look this movie up. It's on several streaming services. It's available on DVD and Blu-ray. You got to do yourself the favor of watching this movie. It is a wonderful film. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this week's review, and join me back here next week, where I will be doing installment 4 of the 4-part series, where we will discuss 1992 Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. And until then, y'all take care.